Welcome to another great edition of Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. This is a very special episode, and I think my excitement is not only on the topic, but it's who I'm doing this with. And it's a guy that I've known for a very, very long time, a guy that is super, super smart, a guy that, hustles in the industry. And it's one of those things that I really respect, that all of those qualities in an individual. And we've had such good conversations. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Sunil Bagai from Prosperex. I know this has been a long time in the making and we figured out our schedules. So thank you for coming on the show. And the exciting topic we're going to talk about is watching evolution of the VMS in our industry and how to take advantage of the innovation and the next gen of technology and the VMS within our industry. So Sunil, thanks, man, for taking the time out of your busy day to come on and chat with me.
My pleasure, Jeff, and it's great to see you, and thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to have conversations with you. You and I have kind of touched base and talked at different events and conferences and on the phone a number of times, and you always have an interesting perspective. So thank you for hosting. Thank you for also, having this group where we can all share ideas. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
So talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit about your background, founder of Prosperex. And, once again, I mentioned about your hustle. It's fantastic. And seeing the growth in the company has been amazing. But how did you get here?
It's a good question. I could go very far back. I was talking to my team about this. I decided to be an entrepreneur in, my early 20s. And that's not from coming from an entrepreneurial background, right? My mom worked full time. My dad was, also, working full time. None of us have an entrepreneurial background prior to me starting to do a business. And I didn't also have other family members that I could kind of tap into or learn from. So no mentors from that respect. So when I worked at different companies, it's not like I haven't worked in large organizations. I worked at IBM, EMC, Veritas. I worked in a number of startups as well. But I learned that when I was in a large organization, I was always put into a box. Hey, do this and do it well, and you're kind of like you do that, and everybody else does their role, right? Um, which never suited my personality. I always thought bigger. I always thought, hey, what about this? How does this affect this? I wanted to understand how does every piece of the puzzle fit together and how does it work? And so, I made a decision early on that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I knew I didn't have experience. I knew in advance that I would probably fail and not just fail once, but multiple times.
Yeah.
And so I gave myself permission to do that. And I thought, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, it's not because I expect that I'm going to be successful. It's that I expect that I won't be. And so it will be a 20, 30, 40-year long process. And through that process, I'll continue to learn, evolve, and grow. And that's kind of what's happened. This is now my fourth company.
Yeah.
And, I incorporated my first one in 2001. And so Prosperex is kind of the culmination of everything I've learned and how I've grown. And it's been a tremendous experience and ride. You asked about the evolution of VMS, right? Well, what's a VMS really designed to do? If you look at the name, it says vendor management system. Obviously, the name probably back in the old days was appropriate, right? When it first started off as the industry, evolved, it was to help manage suppliers because maybe it was difficult, it was challenging when you had dozens of suppliers, lots of contracts, getting them jobs and making it more efficient. I get that, but what was the end goal of that? The goal was always to still find the right talent,
Yeah.
right? The end goal is to help organizations be able to scale up and to be able to do that effectively, efficiently, at low cost with high visibility. So it's evolved a lot, right? Like when you look at what the base focus and function of a VMS was and what it is today, it's evolved tremendously. And so in some ways the term vendor management system is probably less applicable
Correct.
And we're probably growing out of that now, but it's stuck. The name is stuck. And so, that's another area that we should think about is, well, what does a VMS actually do today that is way beyond just vendor management, right?
Well, and if you think about it, and I, in thinking this through, it had become almost like the ERP for the contingent workforce. So it's a backbone because it touches every aspect of helping them find, it's helping them onboard, and then helping them get like track budgeting, invoicing, and payment, all the administrative back end, and simplify those transactions. But that kind of simplified workflow, there's lots of new features, functionalities, and innovations happening to make that that process better. And quite honestly, there's a lot different sources of candidates now, with as the evolution of the internet has happened,
Yep.
as evolution of technology around direct sourcing has happened, as the evolution of our industries happened, where the procurement people of 2008, 2009, when that really became centralized of your contingent workforce because it was a cost-saving measure in that downturn, really became popular, and procurement owned the contingent workforce. And now it's evolving into a talent issue over the last few years, and HR is getting more and more, and talent acquisition is getting more and more involved. So when you evolve all of those things, the evolution of the VMS and the thought of it just as a procurement system has to change with that, right?
It's a really, really important nuance, right? It actually, if you think about it, um, if you're implementing a VMS, you have to ask yourself the question, what result am I seeking from implementing this VMS, right?
Mhm.
Remember, we just mentioned a moment ago, it's more than just a VMS now. It's like there's so much more it can do, but it depends on the mindset you come in with, right? If you're in procurement and your goal is to consolidate suppliers and reduce costs, well, that's the result that you're going to get from this tool, right?
Yeah.
If you're in HR and you see that, hey, I need to augment my full-time employee workforce with a lot of other talent and many talent sources, so we can become the best at attracting and scaling our organization with the best talent so we can reach meaningful outcomes. Well, that's a very different mindset than just cost savings and visibility, as an example,
Yeah.
right? And by the way, it doesn't matter where that mindset lives. It could be procurement, it could be HR, it could be in IT, it could be departmental, or it doesn't matter where it lives. But the what drives the outcomes you get out of a technology is really the mindset you come in with, what results you're aiming for. And I find that oftentimes the results are not clear. They're not clearly defined at the outset. And therefore, you're never going to be able to really hone in and get the outcomes that you're expecting, right? And that becomes part of the challenge.
Well, and as we talked about the talent, shortages, and we talk about those issues, the sources of where that talent comes from has varied now.
Mhm.
And it used to be nice
Absolutely.
and clean. Let's just push it all through a vendor community and then use the simple VMS.
Yep.
But looking at the evolution of the front end, there's online platforms, there's independent recruiters that could be deemed vendors, but they're not big enough to be quote unquote a approved vendor per
Sure.
se. There's the direct sourcing of talent. And
Yeah. So
so there's so many
let's
different sources of
yeah.
talent, and the evolution of that has been interesting to watch, but it's been kind of had to push by a client that's been watching innovation happen, the vendor community that has been making innovation happen, and the need is starting to pair itself, but still, is it causing some friction? And can we help? What we said, what the basic is match a person with a job and a job with a person, right?
Yeah. But let's talk about why
Yeah.
some of these, things have evolved. Um, At first, the problem was just managing vendors, and that means the supply base that you have contracts with. So this could be 10 suppliers, 20 suppliers, 50 suppliers. Different organizations have different sizes. They may have, 10 per job categories. So you have 10 for IT, 10 for professional, 10 for light industrial, whatever it is, right? So you have your favorites and you have contracts with them. That is the old paradigm. That's how it started. But the new paradigm is not that, right? And the reason for that is because unfortunately, having a fixed supply base does not allow you to be agile. It does not allow you to meet the needs of the hour, right? The needs change of an organization and suppliers change over time. And the challenge is it was not a data-driven approach that got us there, right? We now have the ability to look at data in real time to see, hey, what's the best supplier for this particular job, right? And so we can make those decisions in real time using AI, you can use automation, but also what it means to be a supplier has evolved, right? Like you said earlier, it could be an independent recruiter. It used to be like large national staffing agencies were the only ones that could find talent. That's not true anymore, right? You actually can find talent with boutique firms. You can find talent through offshore firms, independent recruiters, RPOs. You can find talent through marketplaces. And so there's a number of ways, but if you look at the way traditional VMS was designed, it was designed to handle one type of supplier. The newer VMSs, Prosperix included, are designed to handle many, many
Yeah.
types of what we call suppliers, right? What we call a talent supplier is really a ubiquitous term to say anybody that can source you talent,
Yeah.
regardless of who is the employer of record, by the way, right?
Yeah.
So
And
you can
that's
separate that
important,
responsibility.
right? Because taking and taking a look back, you have to, okay, how the existing workflow is this. And so let's look at that workflow without totally tearing it apart.
Total.
How do we put the new supply base, the new types of vendors into that workflow without, like I've said, tearing it apart and making it less efficient. So, and why I say this is we have a lot of people in our audience, both on the vendor side and the client side, that says, well, no, we're not a staffing vendor. We're some cool technology platform or marketplace or whatever, and they want to name it something cool. But in the eyes of the workflow, it's a supply of a worker. It's
Bingo.
just sourced different ways, right? So that's got to fit into that.
And right now, the way we see it is a hub and spoke model, right? The VMS will be the hub that will allow these businesses, large enterprises, to be able to procure talent, mid-sized enterprises, large enterprises to procure talent through one common interface, one technology, right? Platform. The spokes are all the different sources. And it really doesn't matter what the source is,
Yeah.
frankly, right? And it could be direct source, it could be, supplier source, independent recruiter source, marketplace source. It doesn't really matter. But you need an efficient way to get the job syndicated out into the world and for the talent to find its way back in, represented by suppliers or not,
Yeah.
right? And so at the end of the day, that's really the efficiency that technology can create, right? And why do we want that? Well, there's value in having more choice. There's value in opening up the supply base from a few to many, right?
Well, and think
And
of the pandemic, right? The talent pool is global now. So
it's
that's the
global.
other side of it, is how do you source some of the best talent that's outside of that 45-minute to an hour radius of your office, even though we have some CEOs trying to
Absolutely.
force people back into the offices, you're gonna always find the best talent where the best talent is. And sometimes it's not within 45 minutes of your office. So,
So
it's amazing to have that option.
we have a policy internally. We will hire the best talent no matter where it is in the world. It really doesn't matter anymore,
Yeah.
right? And it's a remote first mentality. Now, I know not all businesses do this. If you're a light industrial distribution center, you need the right talent locally, and that's a whole different use case,
Yeah.
right? But it's more of a philosophical focus of, hey, best talent wins. It's
Yeah.
not about location that wins. If you can
And the
design your
old traditional
organization,
vendor model would have said, hey, these are the suppliers that we need, and generally to source talent within 45 minutes of our office. right?
Exactly.
How do you integrate the international recruitment capabilities into programs,
International,
right?
remote,
Yeah,
hybrid, but also let's again go back to why, right? At the end of the day, if I have more choice of talent, I can find better quality, I can usually get it faster, and more importantly, I can save money doing it. And we've been able to prove this over and over and over again, right? You increase choice, but the key is this: you have to increase choice without creating other problems, right? What I mean by that is, look, Uber is increased choice. When I go and say, I want to take a ride from here to the airport, it Uber is smart enough, the algorithms are smart enough to match the best drivers for my ride
yeah,
in real time. Well, if you can use that same intelligence in Uber and matching rides, and you can do the same thing with jobs
yeah,
and talent suppliers,
yeah,
right? And you can do it in real time. It's a data-driven approach. You don't need quarterly scorecards. You don't need to wait for a later date when you figure out how well somebody's performing. You can do it in real time based on actual data, past performance, even recruiter bandwidth and availability, the talent pools that they represent, meaning who are they already engaged with that are really a good fit for that role right away, right? So that's what we look at. We employ technology to help us make these decisions in a more meaningful way so you get better outcomes.
so and it's, when you think of it that way, the open API or the ability to integrate with new technologies or quickly build features of new technologies to access the various sources, because it'll be evolution, is so important. And like, are you seeing that trend to more of this? And I guess it would almost be an ecosystem approach versus trying to always be every feature. Is that some of the innovation you're seeing? Or is it, the old school, let's just build it, or a combination of both?
There are pros and cons to both approaches,
Yeah.
right? If you build everything, then one of the values of building everything is that you have the ability to have data in one place.
Yeah.
You know, the system, vendor management system is a system of record. An ATS is a system of record. It's where all data lives, right? An HCM system is a system of record. The challenge is, when you have many different applications, the problem is data sometimes is not shared across systems, and you don't have the right user experience to really effectively manage the end-to-end process. So, for example, organizations will go out of the system to do things like onboarding
Yeah.
today, right? Well, you can then debate whether onboarding should be a part of the vendor management experience or not, right? For some reason it's required, and every time you hire, you need to onboard,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think that there needs to be an intelligent set of features that are core in the platform that are essential. And Apple's done that. They have their own certain apps that are part of their ecosystem, and Android's done that. And then there's others will design,
Yeah.
right? That are above and beyond. And I think just finding that balance is really the question, but it's an and, it's not an or, right? It's
Yeah.
both. You need to have enough core capabilities in the end-to-end system, as well as the ability to connect with many others in a meaningful way that creates a positive user experience, right?
Yeah, so that the smooth integration, so it's a seamless user experience, and then making sure the data exchange is there. So wherever the data is collected, it's available to be assessed and reviewed, right? So
Yep, absolutely. And let's use the use case of independently as an example,
yeah,
right? It's a great use case. So, for example, your technology platform that you're developing with independently allows you to vet, contractors to figure out whether they're compliant and can actually truly be independent contractor and classified appropriately. So there's less risk and compliant, and there's increased compliance, right?
right.
Now, if a vendor management system can build that, but it's complex, or they can integrate. And I think that's a perfect example of integration, right? Where we can basically work together. We can leverage the technology that you've developed for that one particular workflow, right? And so this is a great example of how vendor management systems can leverage existing technology and beyond what they do normally, right?
Yeah.
To provide a better user experience for their customers.
Whereas core functionality like invoicing, consolidation of
Exactly.
invoicing, and reconciliation of invoicing. And that often, I think that although there may be some best of breed technologies out there, that's a core functionality within the VMS solution.
It is, but it's interesting. Even invoicing is evolving a lot, right? You would think that some of these areas are baked and they don't need to change. But one of the we look at a lot of RFPs, and RFPs kind of are indicative of what the customers are asking for and what their
Yeah.
where their mindset is. One of the major apps is, there's several that are a lot of customers are asking for over and over again. One is they want flexible workflows, right? They want to be able to say, hey, this workflow for hiring, this workflow for approvals, this workflow for my invoicing process, because every business is different. They want to be able to, leverage these technologies, but in a way that maps to their business and not just in a generalized way, right? So creating that flexibility is important. Back to invoicing, one of the other things that gets asked for over and over again is uh, custom defined fields, right?
Yes.
Or client defined fields.
Yes.
And so a lot of the traditional VMSs are not great at this. And both at the workflows and flexibility, and then also this custom defined field where the customer can say, hey, I want to be able to add these three fields for mapping taxes in this one particular province or city or state or
Yeah.
country, and just be able to map that to my invoice and then be able to report on it after the fact,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the kind of innovation that, it just gives you flexibility to be able to take a core capability like consolidated invoicing, and allows you to have even more capability where it meets your needs specifically, not just general needs.
And it's not a massive professional services scenario where you've created a monster when you need to fix it in the future, potentially.
Uh, yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. At the end of the day, if your VMS is taking you months to implement, or you have to basically engage into these really long custom development cycles with any vendor, you probably have chosen the wrong VMS now,
Yeah.
right? The newer VMSs do not require that. It's all no code or low code, and more importantly, allow you to kind of really get just configurable options where you have a lot of flexibility, drag and drop, easy to, set up and go live literally in weeks rather than months. That's really the mindset you should have today, and not on these long implementation cycles and complex setups. And, no, it shouldn't be that way at all.
I have to say, I think we could probably talk for another hour or 10 hours, and we always do when we get together. But I once again, I'm so thankful for you coming on. You're one of the smartest guys I know in this industry. So thank you for taking some time and just chatting with me about the evolution of the VMS, the technology, different technologies in our industry. It's been a real pleasure and a learning experience here.
My pleasure, Jeff. I always love hanging out with you and talking to you. So thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome.